Okay, in the second part, I should change this to say part 2 because we did part 1 and 2 together. In part 2 of chapter 3.3, we're going to be finding function values. So let's read these definitions real quick. Equations that are functions can be written in a form called function notation, and that's something really important that you need to remember. Okay, so for example, if we have the equation y equals 2x minus 1, it can be written as f of x equals 2x minus 1. I'm hoping you can see the only thing that changed here is that the y turned to f of x, okay? And that's how this is said, f with parentheses around the x. This is said f of x. Let me write that down here. F of x, okay? That's how this is said. So all we did here was replace y with f of x. In the function, x represents the elements of the domain, we already knew that, and f of x now represents the elements of the range. This is helpful when you want to find the value in the range that corresponds to a specific value in the domain. Here, let's look down here at this first example. If I have f of x equals -1 plus 3x, and now, instead of f of x, my first example says f of -2. What this means is if I were to take -2 and input it into this equation, it would tell me the output for this coordinate. So what that means is if -2 were my x coordinate and I input it into this function, my output would be my y coordinate. Okay, so that would tell me a specific ordered pair or a specific point that was on this line. Okay, so let me do an example for you. In this section, all you're going to be doing is plug and chug. You've heard that before many times, and I almost kind of hate using that phrase, but essentially that's what you're doing here. You're going to plug in -2 wherever x is, because this says f of x, but now it says f of -2. So you replaced the x with -2. You're going to do the same thing in the equation. Wherever you see an x, you're going to put a -2. So we have f of x equals -1 plus 3x. All right, so what we're going to do this time is replace it with -2. So we'll have f of something equals -1 plus 3 times that something. And what did we say we need to substitute in for x? -2. Okay, so f of -2 is going to be -1 plus 3x, well, 3 times -2. And now it's just a matter of doing the math. Now, when you do your math, you need to be really careful and make sure that you follow your order of operations. We spent an entire chapter, most of chapter 1, talking about order of operations. So, PEMDAS, what needs to happen first? Well, multiplication or division needs to happen first. So what is 3 times -2? -6. So -1 plus -6 or -6, it's the same thing. And so we're going to have our final answer, f of -2 equals, what's -1 minus 6? -7. Okay, so my input was -2 and my output was -7. So if I wanted to write this as an ordered pair, my ordered pair would be -2 comma -7. Okay, f of x equals -1 plus 3x. Okay, we're going to substitute where we find x, we're going to substitute in something different. And that thing is 6. So we're going to put 6 here and here. Now let's just do our math. F of 6 is equal to -1 plus, what's 3 times 6? 18. So f of 6 is going to be equal to -1 plus 18 is 17. So now these can get a little bit tricky. Sometimes you're going to be substituting in a variable as well as a number, such as this one. Okay, whoops. So before we were substituting in only -2, and now this time we're going to substitute in c minus 2. So I hope you realize that your answer is going to have a variable in it, and that's okay. All right, so we still have that same function that we're going to use, -1 plus 3x. So f equals -1 plus 3. And what we're substituting in is c minus 2, c minus 2. Hopefully you can tell right here that we're going to have to do some distribution. So f of c minus 2 equals -1. Let's do our distribution. 3 times c, 3c, and 3 times -2, minus 6. Okay. Now let's combine like terms and get a nicer looking answer here. C minus 2 equals -1 minus 6, we already said, like up in the example above, is -7. So we'll have 3c minus 7. And that's as far as we can go with this. Okay, so f of c minus 2 equals 3c minus 7. All right. Let's go over here to this one. We have f of a plus 2. Notice how the plus 2 is on the outside of the f of a. So what that means is plus 2 is not going to be part of the equation until the very, very end. All right? So we're going to take our f of x, and wherever we find x, we need to substitute in a, and then at the very, very end, we'll add 2. So f of x equals -1 plus 3x. Well, let's do our substituting. Now we have f of a. Okay. Now, don't forget that plus 2. Now we can tack it on to the end. Okay. So let's do any math and combining like terms. F of a equals -1 plus 2. Those are like terms. Those are both constants. We can combine them. So -1 plus 2 is going to be +1. So we'll have 1 plus 3 times a is 3a. Okay, and that's our answer here. Let's do these last two down here on the bottom. We're going to have to substitute for x in a couple of different spots here. So we've got g of x this time, and it doesn't matter that the variable has changed. F, g, doesn't matter. You're still going to do the same thing. Equals x squared minus 3x plus 5. Well, we're substituting in -1 wherever we see x. So g of is going to be x squared minus 3 plus 5. All right, let's fill in our blanks with what we need to substitute in, and that is -1. So g of -1 is -1 squared minus 3 times -1 plus 5. And let's just do our math. So g of -1 is equal to, what's -1 squared? +1. Anytime we square a negative, it becomes positive. So it's like -1 times -1. Two negatives make a positive. So 1. Then we've got -3 times -1. Once again, two negatives make a what? Positive. So 1 plus 3 plus 5 over here at the end. Don't forget about him. So what's 1 plus 3 plus 5? 9. I want you to try this one on your own. Let me highlight it here. Find g of 2. I'm going to set up this problem for you, and then I'm going to have you pause to keep working out the problem on your own, and then resume the video to see how you did. So let's set up the problem first. We have g of x equals x squared minus 3x plus 5. So what we're going to do, since it's not x anymore, now it's 2, we need to take 2 and plug it in everywhere we see x in this equation. So we're going to have g of some number, that's where the 2 is going to go, equals that number squared minus 3 times that number plus 5. So let's go ahead and plug in 2 where it needs to go. everywhere that it needs to go. And now at this point, I want you to pause the video, try finishing this problem on your own, and then when you think you've got it, press play. Okay, I got g of 2 equals 3. How'd you do? Okay, let's move on to the next page. We have two functions given to us now in the directions. We have f of x equals 6x plus 7 and g of x equals x squared minus 4, okay? Just because you're given two functions doesn't mean anything. Pay really close attention to what they're asking you and it should be simple. In this first example, they're telling you to work with the f of x. In this second example, they once again want you to work with the f of x. So for these first two, you don't even have to pay attention to g of x. Pretend like it's not even there, okay? You just need to plug in -3 and r minus 2 for f of x function, all right? Now look down here, now we have g of 5. Same thing as before, just reverse. Now you're gonna kind of ignore f of x and only work with the g function. Substitute 5 in wherever you see x, okay? So you can do those three. But let's look over here at this one. This one wants you to use f of x and g of x and then add them together, okay? So let's do that. We have f of x equals 6x plus 7 plus g of x, which equals x squared minus 4. So let's do some plugging in. We have, f of something equals 6 times that something plus 7. And then we have g of something equals that something squared minus 4. So for f, we want to substitute in 2. So we'll have f of 2 equals 6 times 2 plus 7. And then for g, we're substituting in -2. So g of -2 equals -2 squared minus 4. Now, well, like I said, it's just a matter of doing the math and adding it up. So 6 times 2 is 12 plus 7 plus g of -2, which is -2 squared. That's going to be 4 minus 4. Well, what's 4 minus 4? 0. Those are gone. So now it's just a matter of 12 plus 7, which is 19. Okay? So just go really, really slow with those and pay close attention to what you need to plug in. Oh, hey, look, there's another example like that down here at number 4. So the ones that have been left blank here, which is only on the second page, let's call these number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, okay? So I want you to do those 7 problems on your own. Don't forget to answer your questions, and we'll do some more examples of this when you come to class tomorrow.